So let's look at Igor Tudor in terms of my positives and negatives. I needed to make myself feel better after I read about a 3-4-2-1 aficionado who is going to save us from relegation and has been compared to Conte. I needed to look back at his most common team and formation choice during his time at Juventus this season. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against 3 at the back, just when it is needed. That is, when the opposition is playing with 2 strikers. I'm not a fan of watching 3 defenders marking 1 striker and getting dominated in midfield, just like against Man City recently. So I was scared of our possession or the lack of it in Tudor teams. So I thought I'd look back at Tudor's stats during his time at Juventus, starting with the end of the 24-25 season. Tudor took charge of Juventus 6 days before game week 30 of the 24-25 season. If we start with possession, which was my first worry, my first positive find was that in 5 of the 9 games, Juventus had more possession than their opponents, against lower finishing teams, mid-table teams, and against one top 6 team in Roma. We can ignore the possession in the 2 games where they had red cards. In the 2 games they had less possession. In the Genoa game, which was his first, it was only by 1%. The Bologna game seems an anomaly, which could be based on Tudor's attempt to change formation to a 3-4-1-2 to counteract Bologna's possession style. So, a 52% possession average overall, which changes to a 60% average if you discount the red card games and the Bologna game. Of course, this is with a Juventus team, but still. You might be thinking, what are you talking about? I don't care about possession, we need to stay in the league. And you'd be right to think that. So crucially, Tudor won his first game and 5 of his 9 games overall. He drew 3 and lost 1. Noticeably, he drew against 2 mid-table teams and 1 top 6 team. I then moved on to XG, a fascination these days. Again, we have to remember this is Juventus, but there's hope here too. We can ignore one of the red card games. Juventus had a greater XG than their opponents in 7 of the 8 games left, only beaten by Roma, who finished top 6. They had a total average XG of 1.19 or 1.25 ignoring the red card game, and an opposition XG of 0.82 or 0.71 ignoring the red card game. Now let's talk Juventus formations. This is trusting my research websites, I admit. I've mentioned changing to the 3-4-1-2 against Bologna and how it may have affected possession. However, it earned a draw, but not a fun watch. An interesting change to 4-2-3-1 against Udinese, with a win and great possession. In terms of opposition formations, Juventus faced 4 at the back 3 times. They had less than 50% possession each time and an XG of less than 1 each time. A worry, especially in a mostly 4 at the back Premier League. Now for the start of the 25-26 season. As well as the 3 at the back worry, there was another alarm bell in my mind, and that was the 8 winless games to end his reign that everyone talked about. The immediate thing that strikes you about the run of games is where the teams are in their league currently. You can see the number of top 6 teams to play. We'll start with possession again. The only games that Juventus didn't have greater than or equal than their opponents is Inter at home and Madrid away. So a 55% possession overall, so not bad. And in terms of the ones and O's, the 8 games without a win consisted of 5 draws and 3 losses. 5 of the teams were top 6 teams and 2 were on the cusp. The games I would question is the draw with Verona away, a bottom half team, and Lazio away, Tudor's last game, and they were a mid-table team. However, in both games, Juventus dominated in terms of possession. In the Verona game, they conceded a penalty and Verona sat in, and in the Lazio game, they had an XG of 2.02. Moving on to XG, we can see 5 games out of the 11 where Juventus's XG is less than their opponents, giving them an average XG of 1.46. Still better than last year's. What's worrying is the increased opponent's XG from 0.71 last year to 1.42. What can we put this down to? You can see changes in Tudor's formation after playing Villarreal, it seems. And I wonder if the pressure of the 1, 2, 3, 4 draws made him stray away from his 3-4-2-1 principles to play a 3-4-1-2. And then a 4-3-3, then a 3-5-2, and then a 3-5-2. The changes in formation didn't help, and with a terrible mistake from Jonathan David sealing Tudor's fate in an undeserved loss in his last game against Lazio. Looking at the opposition's formation and playing against 4 at the back, only one of the games was a win, and that was against a Genoa from the bottom half of the table. Could Villarreal's 4-3-3 have been the last straw to make him experiment to try and break his run of draws? But to no avail, they drew. They then lost facing 4 at the back in Tudor's last 2 games against Madrid and Lazio. So in conclusion, Tudor's positives. He makes an impact. The players obviously listen and do what he says. There should be an element of respect from his football playing background too. Again, we do have to remember this is a Juventus team and squad. Next, his possession percentages are much better than I thought they would be. He also does well against lower league teams. And his 3-4-2-1 is what he knows, and it seems to work more often than not. Also, his 8 games without a win is another overreaction in my eyes. Finally, even with 3 at the back, he creates well looking at his XG. Negatives though. Top 6 teams. It seems like he doesn't have the answer. Facing 4 at the back is a worry, and it is a key worry considering the Premier League favours 4 at the back. Also, he has changed formations, possibly to cope with 4 at the back, but changing formations hasn't worked. My next port of call, I thought I'd look at his time with Udinese, purely because there was a relegation fight involved. Tudor took over in 2018 with Udinese in trouble. They hadn't won or drawn in 11 games, and they were only 4 points above the relegation zone. There were 4 games to go, and one of those was Inter. The other games were Bologna, Hellas Verona and Benevento, all down there and fighting. Be scared, be very scared. However, out of the games, Udinese drew 1 and lost 1, of course, to Inter, and won the other 2. Beating Bologna in the last game and finishing 5 points above relegation. Talk about working under pressure. However, Tudor and Udinese could not come to an agreement the next year. After 2 sacked managers, Tudor was then called in with Udinese, this time only 1 point above relegation, with 11 games to go. But this time they had to play AC Milan, Roma, Lazio, Atalanta and Inter, all top 6 teams. They also had to play Genoa, Sassuolo, Cagliari, Spal, Empoli and Frosinone. Udinese finished with 3 draws, 2 against AC Milan and Inter, and 3 losses against Roma, Lazio and Atalanta, but 5 wins, which allowed them to finish 5 points above relegation. So after looking at his Udinese experience, you'd have to add pressure as a positive on this list. And if he likes a bit of pressure, he's in the right place. Arsenal home, here we come. This has been an analysis from Dear Tottenham Hotspur. Visit our website for more previews, reviews and thoughts. Yours sincerely and faithfully. Come on, you Spurs!